Welcome everybody to another episode of Fins Nation. I am your host, Louis Sung, and today we're going to be discussing Mike McDaniel. The Miami Dolphins recently lost their first preseason game against the Atlanta Falcons. They weren't really able to put up any points. They only scored one field goal. It was a rather poor showing overall from the team itself, but we did get some valuable information regarding certain members of the team, which is what we were ultimately hoping to get from the Miami Dolphins' first preseason game. We learned a little bit about Austin Jackson. We learned a little bit about Liam Eichenberg and the left guard position as a whole. We learned a little bit about Noah Igbenogany and Channing Tindall. We learned about Cam Smith. We learned about a lot of players. And as the week progresses, we will go into a little bit of that. But right now, what I want to discuss, like I said, is the Mike McDaniel situation. So what exactly is the situation I'm referring to? I'll go ahead and get into the details of that in just one moment. But before that, really quick, just want to go ahead and mention that as always, this show is brought to you by our good friends over at You Brake Wheel Fix. You Brake Wheel Fix is the complete automotive wheel solution. Ever parked too close to the sidewalk curb? You Brake Wheel Fix specializes in the repair of damaged wheels from bends, cracks, and curb rash. Or maybe your wheels are faded or peeling. You don't need to replace them, as You Brake Wheel Fix can refinish them to like new. Offering complete refinish options through powder coating, machining, and polishing, You Brake Wheel Fix is the answer to all of your wheel needs. And if you're just looking to give your ride a new look, You Brake Wheel Fix also offers many car customizing options, such as new custom wheels and tires from your favorite brands, performance upgrades, window tinting, and suspension modifications. Located just south of Aventura, you can reach Mark and his staff at 305-748-0112 or online at youbrakewheelfix.com. They are really active on all social media platforms at You Brake Wheel Fix, so shoot them a DM on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter and get an estimate in just minutes. So don't delay, go to You Brake Wheel Fix and start customizing your ride to show off your Dolphins fandom today. This show is also brought to you by PrizePicks.com. PrizePicks.com is the revolutionary fantasy platform where you can now pick up to 6 different players across professional sports leagues. Whether that's the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, one of each, it's up to you to decide. Just choose whether your chosen player will get more or less than their projected stat. They give you free squares, special Taco Tuesday promos, Flex Friday specials where you can get your money back if you lose or multiply the amount of money you can normally win. With offers like that, it's hard to justify not signing up if you are any kind of a fantasy sports fan. So use the promo code FIVE, that's F-I-V-E, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. Again, that's promo code FIVE, spell that out, F-I-V-E. Go to PrizePicks.com, deposit your $100, and let PrizePicks give you $100 of their dollars for you to play with and get started winning today. All right, folks, so let's go ahead and talk about this Mike McDaniel situation. Just as a brief reminder, it was not that long ago that Stephen A. Smith was on ESPN talking about how he could not stand listening to Mike McDaniel talk, that he does not believe a word that that man says, that he basically talked about it because he's mad at Mike McDaniel for not pulling Tua and making sure that he didn't play in the Cincinnati Bengals game. But I've noticed a disturbing pattern in the fan base in that all of a sudden, I'm seeing more and more and more people talk about how they're getting sick and tired of listening to Mike McDaniel as well. That they're tired of the ums and the uhs. They're tired of the fact that he's trying to make jokes, and apparently the jokes are not funny. That the charisma and the charm is quickly wearing off. And I understand in the sense that the Dolphins did just lose. They lost 19-3 to the Atlanta Falcons. But on the other hand, that was a preseason game, and everybody knows that the preseason doesn't mean anything. As a matter of fact, the fact that I actually have a very special treat for you guys. We do have Manny Chang coming on to join me for this show. And if there's anybody who can relate to whether the preseason matters or not, last season against the Dolphins, the Philadelphia Eagles almost gave up 50 points to the Miami Dolphins. And look where the Eagles wound up and look where the Dolphins wound up. So that should tell you right then and there, this preseason doesn't mean much of anything if the Eagles can give up almost 50 points to the Dolphins in preseason and then continue to go on all the way to the Super Bowl. So that should tell you right there what preseason means. But the fact that people are talking about this and acting like, oh, this is terrible. Oh, this is awful. We're so sick of Mike McDaniel thinking he's funny. We're so sick of Mike McDaniel talking and these press conferences are terrible. I want to just go ahead and I want to briefly talk a little bit about why I feel like this really isn't about Mike McDaniel so much as it is about other factors. But I want to go ahead and get Manny's thoughts on the whole thing because, as an Eagles fan, he has a similar coach in Nick Sirianni, who he has his own quirks. And I wanted to go ahead and get Manny's thoughts on this. So, Manny, welcome to the show, my friend. It's great to have you.
Hey, Lewis, thank you so much for having me. Yes, I can definitely relate as an Eagles fan. When Nick Sirianni first hit the scenes, there were a couple of phrases and quotes that even the fan base's radio at 94 WIP, we were all just trying to understand who he was first as a character and who he was as a head coach, right? Because again, this is a first-year head coach. We can also say the same thing with Coach Mike McDaniels. With every coach that goes through the NFL, when it totally goes craziness once you become the head coach and not just a position coach. But I will always say this, right? When Sirianni sat up there during training camp and said, well, a football team has to be treated like a new flower. You got to seed it. You got to water it. You got to watch it blur. Like, you got to watch the bright colors come out. And we were trying to understand this in football perspective, which we understood it as Eagles fans, but the rest of the NFL fan base was like, this guy is comparing an NFL team to a flower. Like, what are we doing? I will say this though, Lewis. I think this new generation of head coaching, the same way that we've been adapting to how this wonderful game has taught us, right? It was hard hitting in the beginning when we first were watching it in black and white, right? And then we saw the emergence of tough defenses and offenses having to run the football to win. And now it's a passing league, right? And now you rarely get a three-line backing scheme on defense on the field nowadays, right? It's all about, like, most teams in this league go with three cornerbacks and five people in the secondary, which was that was never even a thought back in the 90s, right? But we also have to see that this new brand of head coaches, they're coming in with their own thoughts and their own ways of dealing with things, and of course they're adapting. And I think for fan bases that have a young coach, I'm not talking about the Patriots, right? I'm not talking about who else has been in the league quite some time.
Pete Carroll with the Seattle
Pete
Seahawks.
Carroll, Sean Payton, those guys have already established themselves in that type of era. Now the new head coaches today, the head coach from the Chargers, my head coach, your head coach, right? These are guys that are getting first-year opportunities just from 1 or 2 seasons of being able to do so well at their coaching positions. It's like, I get it why certain fans are kind of getting tired of it and stuff, but the NFL is just different. And one thing that did help us Eagles fan base, Lewis, we were able to look past the phrases of the flower, and we were able to look past the little gimmicks. Why? Because we won. Yes, we didn't win the Super Bowl, but when you get there and you reach that high pedestal of competition in this league, in this game, I don't care what my head coach has to say. If my head coach wants to talk about, that dark chocolate tastes better than I don't know what, I don't care. Like, to me, and listen, I would say he has these antics, Nick Sirianni, during games where he'll look at the camera like, yeah, we're up 14-0, come get me. And those are sometimes things that I wish he could tone down a little bit. But I think Coach Mike McDaniel has done an unbelievable job at reestablishing this franchise in quite some time. That, bro, I know you've been covering the team for a while. I've also covered the team for a while. This is probably the most exciting time that the Miami Dolphin fan base has been able to look forward to. And for certain fan bases to not start nitpicking, oh, I don't like when it says duh and ums. Guys, instead of concentrating on that, why don't we just enjoy what's happening as a franchise in the organization and on the field, that there is some sort of cohesiveness, right? There's some sort of togetherness, there's no outside drama. There's no players getting bullied. There's no coaches suing anyone. Like, this is a brand new era of Dolphins football. And I just feel like, unfortunately, there's just these fans that just love chaos, Lewis. They love it. Trust me, as an Eagles fan, I know. It's like we didn't win the Super Bowl. Oh, screw Nick Sirianni. And it's like, I'm trying to explain to them, do you remember the times before we won the Super Bowl? Do you want to go back to Andy Reid and make it to 7 title games and to 1 Super Bowl and never win one? No. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't pick and choose. I get it. The human emotion when it comes to sports is so high, that sometimes I feel like we get carried away with it. I'm not saying that should be a reason. But again, to me, Coach McDaniels is establishing himself every single week, every single practice, every single session that he speaks with the media down here. Now, will it be different? Maybe if he was in a bigger market in New York. I personally, I've thought that Robert Saleh has handled that media so well, especially noticing that he drafted a quarterback. Now that quarterback is having a backpedal for now Aaron Rodgers, and they haven't been this excited for their season since Brett Favre. How long was that? Almost 15 years ago, 17, 18 years ago. But listen, you got to let Coach McDaniels just do his thing, man. If you were so excited when he got hired day one and you were sub-quoting his poses and his comments and stuff, you can't just all of a sudden say, I'm getting sick of tired of his ums. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
No, and you made an excellent point, and that was kind of the point where I was going with this. So many people are starting to flip-flop on him for seemingly no reason other than that they're overall frustrated with the state of the Dolphins. And I feel like that this boils down to only one thing, is that they're not winning to the expectations. I think a lot of people were expecting these Miami Dolphins to go and face the Atlanta Falcons in the preseason. Again, I must stress the preseason, where a vast majority of starters, aside from maybe 2 offensive linemen, were sitting that game, and they were expecting them to dominate the Falcons. But that is not necessarily how the preseason works. Again, I use the example I gave earlier. My Dolphins beat your Eagles 47-3 in the preseason, which amounted to a whole lot of nothing when the regular season actually started. So I'm sure Dolphins fans were excited because we put up almost 50 on the Eagles. I'm sure Eagles fans were tearing their hair out that game. But at the end of the day, who had the last laugh? But I feel like this is what it ultimately boils down to. Do you remember when Mike McDaniel first got hired, and there were people, NBC Boston, I think it's it. And there were people literally talking about how they don't think that Mike McDaniel is going to be able to command respect in the locker room because he's not a physically imposing presence. He looked like you, and he looked like me. He looks like me. He looks like me, Manny. He looks like a nerd. He looks like me. So people were looking at Mike McDaniel thinking, this little guy, he's the head coach? Really? This guy who looks like he belongs in the AV club in high school? Yeah, he's the head coach. And you know what? He's freaking genius when it comes to offense. He's proven it already. People were so convinced that Tua Tagovailoa was a waste of time, and the fact that he was willing to tie himself to Tua was probably the biggest mistake that he could make in his career. And he turned all of that into one of the most prolific offenses in the NFL. And if Tua had not gotten hurt, then they very easily could have beaten the Buffalo Bills. They almost did with Skylar Thompson, of all people. So if Tua had been playing that game, the Adioski Buffalo Bills in the wild card in their own stadium, I might add. But you can't obviously just look back and do revisionist history. What happened, and people were frustrated over what happened. So we're starting to sour on Mike McDaniel. We're starting to look at him and being like, you know what? You're not as funny as you were when we first hired you. So I don't think you should make these jokes anymore. Okay, so let's do the opposite then. Who was the opposite of Mike McDaniel? That was the previous head coach.
Well,
Brian Flores.
How about Mr. What was his famous quote? I'm feeling a little queasy.
Yes, that's Joe Philbin. Yeah, but I'm thinking. But I was looking. But the example I was giving was the reason I'm doing it is because Brian Flores. He was the opposite of Mike McDaniel. Yeah, he's a big buff dude. He fits in. He used to play football, so he's in there with that group.
Very straight face, wouldn't really tell you much. Would be yes, no, I don't know. I'll let you know when I want to tell you. That's it.
Yes, he was a pain to talk to. He wore out his welcome real quick. And a lot of players, they still say they like him. There were some players who didn't like him so much. And we already know what Mr. Stephen Ross thought of him because obviously he's not here anymore. But the simple fact of the matter is that the fan base was getting frustrated with Brian Flores too. Oh my God, he never supports his quarterback. He's always so cryptic. He's never actually open with what he has to say. Yeah, okay. But now Mike McDaniel is open with what he has to say. He is not straight-faced, stone-faced, I don't like you when I look at you. He has a sense of humor. Brian Flores did not have a sense of humor. And so people are getting tired of McDaniel with his antics, his quirks, and people were getting tired of Brian Flores for not having antics and quirks and being so painfully robotic about everything that he did. So is the issue, as you said, that they're tired of his personality, or are they tired of the fact that they're not the best team in the NFL?
Listen, I think when you have a team in the division, as you guys have in the Patriots, that had so much success, and it's been quite some time that Tom Brady has not been in a Patriot uniform, and yet still, even after he's left, it's been 3 seasons, right? 3. And again, this whole notion that all of a sudden the Miami Dolphins are not supposed to be winning the division again. It's like, dude, a house is not just built by you placing it, right? Like, you got to put a foundation, you got to put concrete, you got to measure, you got to do all these other things before you're able to reach the top. Like, do Dolphin fans forget that there's 31 other teams that are also trying to do the same thing as well? Yes, some are not as successful as others, but listen, you have to see this as, what have you done for me lately when it comes to Coach McDaniels? Here's a head coach that people mocked. People thought he was just like you, Lewis, basically a regular guy going into a GameStop and just, not really doing much. The man knows football, and he's shown it to you, okay? He proved it to you in the most crucial situations last year, where the best and the most important player on your team didn't play a full season. He went through this whole concussion protocol / new head coach experience type of stuff, and yet the man still was able to put you guys into the playoffs. And now, I don't want to hear this, oh, well, Dolphins were lucky, and the other, it's like, no, well, we had that West Coast trip has shown me that he wasn't ready to coach. I'm like, dude, you guys' level of expectations cannot just reach the ceiling when you haven't even reached halfway through the wall. You know what I mean? Like, you guys have to understand this. This team is starting to find itself more than ever, not only on the field, but as an organization. And we've covered this team, Lewis, for quite some time, and I mentioned that before. We've seen things off the field that has just ruined this team. You can't say the same thing now. It's like, well, the offensive line, he came from an offensive-minded coach in San Francisco. How come they can't do this? How come they do that? What do you think? That Mike McDaniel has an unlimited number of free agent spots he's able to sign players to, and being able to pay them a crap load of money and bring them in? No, dude, there's other 31 teams doing the exact same thing. And yet this man was able to coach a quarterback, okay, to go to Buffalo and nearly pull off the upset. And I get it. Oh, we didn't win it. That's fine. But when it comes to a first-year head coach dealing with what we had to deal with, not to mention your best offensive lineman wasn't fully healthy, if I remember correctly, right?
That is correct. You had, and
so
the left guard was Lester Cotton.
Left tackle, correct? Left tackle?
Left guard, I think. Lester Cotton was the left guard.
Yeah,
or was he the right guard? I can't remember anymore. I think it was Robert Jones at left guard and then Lester Cotton at right guard. So you had Connor Williams, Teron Armstead on one leg, and I don't even remember who the right tackle was.
Correct. So you had this football team trying to protect the most important player that they weren't even 100%. And yet you almost pulled down the upset against a Josh Allen that, no offense, if we were the Buffalo Bills, I would understand the fans' frustration, because they haven't won shit either. Sorry, excuse me. You know what I'm saying? Like, if there's any team in the division that should be upset, it should be the Buffalo Bills, because they even said the same thing. Oh, once Tom Brady leaves, this division's up for grabs. They've been winning division by division titles, and they still haven't won the Super Bowl. And then here you are with another granted opportunity because of Mike McDaniel, okay? What he's brought into this. Listen, people sometimes get this notion, Lewis, that the way that he speaks to us is the same way that he speaks to the players in the locker room. We don't know that. We don't. And yet we want to sit here and say, oh, well, if he's telling me, man, can you imagine what it is to be Tua in that locker room and when a head coach comes? We don't know that. Like, unless you're working for the team or organization, or if you've been part of the San Francisco 49ers staff and been with Coach McDaniels and blatantly come out and say he's like that, you don't know that. So instead of picking your spots or where to get frustrated with, just have a little bit of appreciation and know that he's put your football team in a better situation than you guys have ever been. And guess what? It's going to be consistent. So you either get on board and stop dealing with this. That's the way that these new head coaches are now today coming into this league, man. They don't make them like Vince Lombardi. They don't make them like Bill Parcells. They don't make them, like Marv Levy. They don't make them like that anymore, man. Like, you got to realize head coaches are not being like, bro, Lewis, you can now be in your 30s and become an NFL head coach. If you would have told me that was possible in the 90s, I would have said you're lying. No possible way. There's no way.
We have to be a worn down, gristled old man to become a head coach.
You would have had to gone through the 20, 30 years in the league as a position coach probably to even get an interview. But this is what I'm saying. If we're going to adapt to the rules, if we're going to adapt the way that this great game is played, we have to adapt to the players and the coaching. We have to. And if you don't like what he has to say, mute. Mute. You think what I'm saying?
No one's asking you to listen to the press conference.
Nobody's asking you to listen. Listen, that's not for you, by the way. Are you the ones asking the questions? No, that's for our hardworking media members to do that, because they have columns to write, because they get fed off this. They have to provide. Okay, so they have a job to do. And if you don't
get fed off of this, Manny.
Yeah, of course. Correct.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what I'm saying is, like, in many ways, Mike McDaniel has made our job easier too. Because with Brian Flores, you have to like, it's like squeezing a rock to get a drop of water. And then McDaniel just gives us quote after quote of stuff that we can use. Like, hey, this is interesting, funny content. I can make something with this. And I'm not saying that, I like McDaniel because he makes my job easier. I'm saying that I like McDaniel because he's human. He acts human. He speaks like a human. Like, I make dumb jokes. Like some people, sometimes they roll their eyes. Sometimes they actually get a laugh out of them. But it's human. And that's what players are nowadays. I don't think there are many players now who just want their head coach to be that guy who's going to be so rough and rugged. And they don't want the war general. They want somebody that they can go to and say, look, let's be real with each other for a moment here.
Correct.
And Brian Flores came from that Belichick tree, and for a while it was refreshing because we were starting to find a little bit of success, at least on defense. Yeah, we understood that and we got it, and there were a lot of players coming out and saying, "Oh yeah, Brian Flores gets us." The defense got them. Offense was a disaster, but at the same time, we were looking at Brian Flores and saying, "Oh yeah, he's really smart," which he is on defense, but we started to see the chinks in the armor really quick. Like, we saw that Brian Flores was very difficult to get along with. We saw that Brian Flores has very, very significant weaknesses when it comes to defense. We see that Brian Flores has trouble showing faith in certain players. And that's something as a head coach. Look, I get it if you are frustrated with a player. I get it that if internally you think that they're not going to get the job done, but to allow such a spectacle to take place with your franchise quarterback, whether you like him or not, whether you chose him or not, whether you wanted Justin Herbert or not, Tua Tagovailoa was your quarterback. And every single time we started hearing this rumor that the Dolphins were interested in Deshaun Watson, it kept coming back around over and over again. It came back around. And not one time did Brian Flores quash that rumor and say, no, we're not interested. No, we don't care. Maybe they really were interested, but if they were, that would have been a big mistake. But my point in all this is, you as a head coach have a duty and an obligation to at least make the attempt to show that you have faith in your guy. Every single head coach that I have ever seen at least pretends that, this is our guy. I'll just a perfect example. You brought it up, Robert Saleh in New York. Until Aaron Rodgers showed up, he was towing the line. Zach Wilson is our guy. And the only reason he ended up getting benched for Mike White at all was because he had said something so monumentally idiotic, taking all the blame off of him and putting it on his teammates, that you could not justify letting him continue. That was a disciplinary action because he said something really, really stupid. Tua has never done anything like that. And yet Brian Flores went ahead and acted like he didn't want Tua around. He didn't care about Tua. Tua was not his quarterback. Ryan Fitzpatrick was his quarterback, do or die. He would rather have anybody than Tua. That's the impression that it gave. And is it any wonder why people were getting frustrated? Because you're making it a point to show, I do not have faith in my quarterback. Well, if you don't have faith in your quarterback, who else has faith in your quarterback? You are the head coach, are you not? Why should we even care? Then Mike McDaniel shows up. And even if he thinks that certain players are not good enough to get the job done, which I'm sure he has ideas in his head thinking, yeah, this guy's not it. But he's not going out there and acting like, yeah, he's not good enough. We're not I'm not he's not giving that impression. And that's so important.
Yeah, no, I think your points there were very, very valid. Again, like we all saw this whole thing with Robert Saleh, and we can kind of say, well, that needed to be done. Then we talk about the regime before. There was no sense of respect. There was no sense of trying to be honest. Like you have that now, and yet I'm sorry, beggars can't be choosers, right? So, and I'm pretty sure the same fan base, the same group that are tired of Mike McDaniel's comments and don't feel like they're that they're valid. I mean, I'm pretty sure if this team made it to an AFC Championship game, they wouldn't be feeling that way.
Exactly.
Because we all know that curing the best cure ever in this sport, in any sport, is winning. When you win, we don't care what gets said. We don't care how they practice. We don't care what players' transactions and salaries and whatever. No, we don't care. It's all about winning. Okay. And this is the final thing that I'll say. The Miami Dolphin fan base, they need to come to a wake-up call in a sense, though, to the ones that are, saying these things. And it's you've never been in this type of position. It took years for Tom Brady to get the hell out of the division. Okay. And you went out there, you got one of the brightest minds ever in football. Okay. And he's come into this organization and he's done things that the previous regimes haven't even done. Okay. He's made the playoffs in his first year. Okay. The defense is as solid, if not even a little bit better than what Brian Flores ever had. You know what I'm saying? And then the offense, and then, yeah, I mean, you mean to tell me that Vic Fangio would leave?
No, I have faith. I have faith.
Yeah.
It's just we haven't seen it yet.
No. Well, what I want to say is that I'm jealous because Vic Fangio could have been the Eagles defensive coordinator if it wasn't for Jonathan Gannon.
Look, you got his protege. You got his protege. You're okay.
Screwing all that up for us. But what I'm trying to say is, you think a coach like Vic Fangio, him having all that damn beautiful knowledge of a defensive mind, it's going to go down to coach a team on defense with a young coach like that if he doesn't believe? Come on. It doesn't make any sense. You know what I'm saying? So instead of complaining and bitching, we lost to the Falcons, but yeah, you're going to be fucking stoked when you beat the Philadelphia Eagles 49, what was it? 47-3.
47-3, I think that was the score.
Listen, I didn't even take that game that serious. I didn't, because my main game was when we scrimmaged you guys during that week. That's what I was more really wanting to see. We had one great big day, and yet all of a sudden everybody got sick, and then nobody could practice anymore, and it is what it is. But preseason to me has always been the cohesiveness, building that bond, building that team chemistry, heading into the regular season, and figuring out your rookies. That's what it is as well. Figuring out who are the second, third, and who's getting cut. You know what I'm saying? So this whole notion of preseason football, I think sometimes, we get so excited. We get so excited that football is back that we have literally fans that sit there after every single play. And I'm asking, you can't just give everything, all your emotions in one single play in the preseason or in one game in the preseason. You know what I mean? Listen, you think you have it bad? Why don't you join me in San Francisco 49er spaces? Okay. Trey Lance today, that offensive line looked like crap. against the second, third stringers of the, I almost said Oakland Raiders, of the Las Vegas Raiders. And yet they have a quarterback controversy. Yet they don't even know yet if Sam Darnold might be their starter. And yet you go to this situation where your head coach came from, and you're built in a much better foundation right now. So instead of complaining about nitpicking little things, just realize, hey, you have a perfect opportunity to once again compete in the conference, win your division, okay, and go from there. Because again, your head coach got you to the playoffs without your starting quarterback, which is the most important position in this game.
There was one tweet that was said, and this encapsulates everything right very nicely, puts a nice little bow on it. The tweet reads, and I quote, "His press conferences are horrible. I don't care if winning or losing. Drives me crazy watching him sit up there with his mambo jumbo making no damn sense, saying and every other word. That being said, if they win, who cares?" So there you go. That says it all right there. if just win,
Lewis, I have come to realize, my friend, I'm sure you as well, you can't please everybody in life, but the minute that they tell you, but I don't care as long as we win, that's when you know it's just that way. It's just that way. Well, you know what I'm saying? Listen, if the Eagles didn't make the Super Bowl last year, or at least make the playoffs, I'm pretty sure that the Eagles fan base that I'm a part of, we will still be talking about Nick Sirianni and these little antics that he does during the game. We look at the camera and he puts a little pencil behind his ear and starts to like, yeah, like look at us. Trust me, I will be the first one. Like, dude, you can't keep doing this if we're not gonna win. Like, it just makes us look bad. It makes us look like we don't even know what we're doing. You know what I mean? But listen, I have faith in Coach McDaniels, man. Listen, this is his first year, his first job as a head coach. This is his second year coming. I'm pretty sure, Lewis, we've all had jobs in our first year that we've learned so much. We tell ourselves, you know what, going to my second year, I won't do this, but I'll do this because I've learned from my experience. You got to give this young mind, an opportunity to correct his little things. And I'm not even going to call them mistakes because I don't know what it feels like to talk to a freaking presser. Do you know how it is to talk to a presser? No.
I did a speech class once. That's about it.
You know what I mean? Like this franchise hasn't won a playoff game since what, 2020?
Won a playoff game?
Yes.
Won a playoff game. That was like back in 2002.
Was it Lamar Smith?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry.
They made the playoffs in 2018 in 2008, lost to Brett Favre in the wild card. And then 2016, they made it to the playoffs, and they lost in the wild card to the Steelers because Tannehill got hurt. Thank you very much, Calais Campbell. And then last season, 2022, Dolphins made the playoffs, and they didn't get anywhere with it. So
when Mike McDaniels wins a playoff game for the Miami Dolphins this season, every one of those fans that were complaining about his antics, we won't be able to find them. They will not be found. Get guaranteed 100%.
I guarantee it too. Well, Manny, I want to thank you for coming on with me. I really appreciate you being here. For anybody who is not already on there, go make sure you're on prizepicks.com. Use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. If you're a fantasy sports fan, you are wasting your time if you are not on Prize Picks by now. They're literally giving away a free $100, and all you have to do is use that promo code 5. Again, that's FIVE, prizepicks.com. And if you need to give your ride a new look, go to You Break Real Fix and go ahead and reach out to them at 305-748-0112 or online at youbreakwheelfix.com. If you're a Dolphins fan or an Eagles fan, Manny, you can reach out to You Break Wheel Fix and they can give your ride the ultimate Dolphins or Eagles makeover. So that's going to be it for this show. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Fins Nation.